audience here. So I'll just briefly mention that when we talk about research here, obviously news, everyone understands when we talk about research here, it relates to a broad set of tasks and documents needed to carry out tasks that are done in finance. So like transcripts, reports, emails, press releases, presentations, and more. We'll talk more about it, but it's not about what academics consider research. But I think this audience already knows that, but felt it was good to confirm it. Okay, so a bit about the company. So we are a tech company. Bloomberg is a tech company. We were founded in 1981. Our main product is the Bloomberg terminal. If you have two screens, this is kind of how the terminal could look like for you. We deliver a lot of information on news, analytics, and market data. The terminal also is it has a diverse set of functionalities, and there can be groups of equities related things. There's a diverse set of functionalities on that. News related things, there's a diverse set of functionality on that. Research related things, there's a diverse set of functionality on that. In addition to this, you also get like messaging, analytics. So in essence, it's a huge real-time information aggregator that lets our clients take action related to their financial decisions. So that's a bit about Bloomberg. To give you an overview, we are about 20,000 plus employees. Because we are also a news organization, we operate out of 167 locations in all over the globe. And because machine learning is such a great adopter of open source, which our company is too, we pretty much everything I present in the talk, it has a blend of things that are both open source and inner source. So things that you would have known about, those are the kinds of technologies that we're using. And we are big believers in contributing back to the academia. So we have data science fellowships and grants, and we try to publish anything that we feel is meaningful so that we can give back to the community that we take from. Okay, so to the meat of the talk. This talk is about search and discovery as it pertains to news and research. So how do I think about this? For me, I think about it as in order for me to surface relevant information, either because somebody's searching for that specific information or because I feel that information is relevant to them. So that's the discovery aspect. The first and foremost thing is for us to be able to model the useful world. And we'll talk a little bit more about this. The second is to actually have things you can search over. So acquiring and enriching content that is meaningful for our clients is critical. We'll touch more on what enrichment of content means in this setting. And the last one is, in order to be able to answer a question, you need to understand who's asking the question. You need to be able to understand what are they trying to accomplish if you answer the question. And that gives you like the best information satisfaction out there. And then we'll touch upon that as well. Once you do these three things well, and each of those big blocks are a lot of items, it can help you construct a good search and discovery system. So let's see. The first thing is modeling the useful world, right? So, I mean, I fully acknowledge that this slide looks pedantic. I mean, everyone here knows what a company is, knows that a public company issues stocks, it's listed against an exchange, it has people working for it, it probably manufactures something, it has a board and other things, right? But when it comes to automating these things using NLP or AI or IR, we need to encode this knowledge either explicitly, which you have a rich literature on semantic web, or implicitly, which is if you use neural networks or things like that, you can also use implicit representations of relationships using vector embeddings and such. So you can represent this in a manifold. But either way, you need to have a good idea of the actors and the relationship between the actors in the space you're trying to search and discover, which for us is finance. To give you a quick example, we'll get to this later, which is that we have a rich hierarchy of topics, and we use these topics as a guiding pole for us to do good search and discovery. But first of all, we need to understand basic questions, right? Like, what is oil? Okay, well, it's a commodity. Well, is oil made up of different things, or is it an atomic entity? That's something important to model. So like, you'll see things like rack prices, or bunker fuels or feedstocks, and how do those topics relate to oil? Bunker fuels are really like, ships, fuels for ships, and people manufacturing them and consuming them are really interested in that topic. Feedstocks applies to any manufacturing plant that is producing something. So it's important for us to actually know the topics that we want to model our document collections on so that we can do a good job at search and discovery. And really, to give you another slice on this, if you look at British Petroleum, this is a snapshot of our knowledge graph from on British Petroleum. You can start to look at the different relationships that are important to British Petroleum or important to our clients in understanding British Petroleum. So left to right, top to bottom, you can see that you can get a snapshot of all the news about British Petroleum. We'll get to this a little later. You can look at all the indices that British Petroleum is a part of. You can look at peers. So you can look at what are other companies like British Petroleum in case you were trying to invest. You can look at who's holding British Petroleum, who are the major holders of British Petroleum, which hedge funds hold British Petroleum, which buy-side firms really hold British Petroleum, who are the analysts who cover British Petroleum. So if you wanted to invest in them and you wanted to look at, oh, what is the street thinking about this company? You may want to read some analyst reports. Who is in the board? Who are the executives? What's the balance sheet? What are some credit default swaps? Which exchanges is it listed on? And you can really zoom in as much as you want to look at the supply chain, the specific people involved in this company, and more. And this is what I mean by having a concrete model of the world that we are interested in. So it's both concepts like companies and commodities, but also concrete realization. So you can ask a question about a company and have a concrete knowledge of the different actors in that company. The second piece, which I'll spend the most time on, is acquiring and enriching content. And just to begin with, we can get this question answered immediately. So why do we really need to do a lot of NLP, speech recognition, IR, all the AI techniques that we are used to? Why is this important? Really, the answer is volume, right? There is an increasing amount of volume of information that each of our clients is required to consume in order to take the best financial decisions. If every person could make do with reading 10 to 100 documents each day, and that would be all they wanted, and they knew exactly which 10 to 100 documents to read, I don't think there would be much point in investing so much. But as you can see, there are billions of messages that might be relevant, and these messages include not just news and social media and filings and transcripts and presentations, but also actual messages that are being exchanged by analysts and sell-side people and buy-side people that also contain information relating to your job. So really, the use of AI in this space is motivated by this. The second thing is, by some estimates, around 80% of all the data is unstructured. So it's not like you can just go and look at a table that is well formatted and every cell in that table has a unit that you can recognize. But really, you need to understand unstructured data really well. And that consists of company filings, press releases, news, social media, analyst reports, CRMs, chats, email, client feedback, ESG disclosures. And you have to provide an SLA on top of it, right? So on any given day at Bloomberg, you have more than 2 million news articles and relevant social media content that's ingested every day. And within 500 milliseconds of that ingesting, all kinds of enrichment have to happen, and they have to be searchable and discoverable and alertable by that time. On top of this, you have an index that goes back in some cases to decades of information that you can search over. And you have to deal with a world that has hundreds of millions of entities and relationships. So this is the space we are operating in, just to reiterate the fact that it's really important for us to use AI in order to help our audience do better search and discovery. So some motivating examples of why someone might want to monitor it. What you're seeing on your slide deck is an event that happened on 26th January of this year. Bill Ackman, for those of you who don't know, is an American investor and a hedge fund manager. He's founder of the Pershing Square Capital Management hedge fund management company. He announced on Twitter that he bought stock in Netflix after he completed his trade and after trading hours. And you can see that it meant Netflix went up 6% just on that tweet. So how do you make these events available to your clients? It's not like, there are many, many such events that can happen. So how do you discover such events and then deliver it to the client so that they can front run this? Well, the answer is really through judicious use of AI, and we'll talk a bit more about what those models are. And also in this, I've listed out some high-level NLP tasks and IR tasks, information retrieval tasks that you might want to use in order to surface such information. So like entity linking, entity recognition, salience, salience of the entity to the document. Sometimes they're not like main actors in the document, so you want to do that. And also sentiment, whether you're a long position holder in the company, is this something that is beneficial to you, or it's actually not beneficial to you? So it's a different kind of sentiment. It's financial sentiment. Now, similarly, as many of you might know, it's not just these tweets and news stories that are important events to monitor. It's also like real-time multimodal data. In this case, it's a press conference. Press conferences are usually spoken, but we want to glean information from them. So as you know, public companies host earnings events, earnings calls. Typically each quarter, there's a prepared statement followed by question answer session. And research has shown, so has our experience, that these earnings calls contain more information than the filings of the companies themselves. So for us, it's very important to track the tone and the sentiment of things happening during an earnings call. So one such event is highlighted in the slide. There was a question asked about capital requirements for Tesla, and the answer was not very clear. So there is a correlation, if not a causality, between what happened during the earnings call and the stock prices of this company after the earnings call. And remember, everything happens live. So we need to be like, if when we think about using AI or NLP, really need to be thinking about the latency at which this has to happen, and also the scale at which this has to happen, because it's not like there's one earnings call going on exclusively at any given time. There are many happening at the same time. Similarly, like, when you're talking about enriching content and understanding content, it's important to know that this is not the kind of content that we are used to in academia alone. Like, many times we have to parse and understand tables, different formats like PDF and HTML and other rich text. And the tables have deep nesting. So to understand any number reported in the tables, you need to really understand what is that number about, which period does it actually pertain to, and what is it describing, what are its units. Similarly, charts, they carry a lot of information, and we want to be able to use this information and present it to the users in a more digestible form. So when you're thinking about enrichment, you also need to think about maintaining the document structure and then enriching it. And finally, I hope I've convinced you that trying to model the financial world and then classifying incoming content as belonging to one or more of the financial concepts that you have modeled, in this case, topics, entities, things like that, is really, really important. So here is a story that is very recent. It's about British Petroleum weighing its sale of its stake in a Russian corporation. Had an effect on its stock prices. Obviously, the recent events caused it to take this decision, or at least hypothesize this decision. And you can see a subset of topics that we associate with the story on the terminal. And the reason we do all of this is we want to find out who should read this story, because our users have set up alerts on various topics, entities, and content. So if someone interested in oil business consume this story, how about those who are interested in the economy of the United Kingdom? How about in the economy of Russia? Or how about people who are specifically interested in BP alone? So this is the reason we classify, and it's important to build the hierarchy of topics up very carefully, and also have them be point in time accurate, because often you're asked questions about documents in history, and some concepts might have evolved and some companies might not have existed in history. So using a model that is accurate as of today doesn't always pay you benefits when you're looking at historical documents. You may want to, depending on the use case, maintain that history, preserve that history, both in terms of your data and in your model. To give you an example, the Bloomberg knowledge graph is point in time accurate with many, many events. So when we query, we can actually query specific with time. Okay, so now we've covered enriching the content. The last piece is about understanding users and the context. So this really asks the question, in order for us to build a good search system, we need to understand who's searching and what are they trying to do. What are they trying to do with the information? And maybe that will help us answer really well. It's important to understand that the Bloomberg terminal has clients across the ecosystem. So financial professionals ranging from investment banks to hedge funds to governments to regulators to national or central banks, basically anyone who's interested in the global capital markets is a client of Bloomberg. So we do have some work to do in order to understand the different roles that our clients are playing, which means different needs. Also, the different times for the different roles means different needs. And what I mean by that is, like, what I try to do today might not be what I try to do tomorrow, even though my role hasn't changed. So the task that you're trying to accomplish actually matters, and we'll have a concrete example of this. So look at the example of a financial research analyst. During earnings season, on any given day, if there's an earnings call, they're trying to prepare for that by reviewing forecasts, by looking at sell-side research and press releases. They want to understand what is the expectation about this company today, and are all my models, which are typically in either Excel or Python, or all my models up to date with the latest market information. And then they want assistance in listening into the conference calls, maybe through transcription, entity linking, setting up alerts, etc., so that they can see how their expectations are either matched or exceeded, or maybe the company underperformed. So the same person on an earnings call day is doing a different set of tasks, as on the right hand side you'll see what they do in order to add a new company to their coverage. There they're thinking, okay, how do I understand more of this company? I need to have a deep search in time and in space to understand who are the competitors, what does the company manufacture, where all does it do business, what are the reports that I can get my hands on, what are the presentations I can get my hands on, what is the ESG picture, what's the sentiment about this company. So again, same role, right? It's the same human being, but depending on the task, you want to answer questions differently. And I mean that because the query might actually be the same. The query that the user posts might actually be the same, but depending on the tasks, you might want to answer the query differently. So hopefully we've now covered that modeling the financial world, or modeling the world that you want to search and discover, is important. Having really rich content that you can enrich is also important. You also need to understand what are the tasks you want to assist your clients in, and understand the users a bit. That's done. Of course, now we can talk about search and discovery itself. So obviously, there are two main ingredients. I'm going to, in the interest of time, I'll be omitting a lot of things that we do at Bloomberg and academics do at large in the search and discovery space. So I'll just hit the highlights. So the first thing is query understanding, right? People are typing in queries, you want to understand the query. And what I've pointed out here is an interesting case that actually happens, which is if somebody typed in Delta last year, one thing is to understand what last year means. The other is to understand, okay, Delta, should I talk about Delta Airlines, or should I talk about the Delta variant of COVID? And it so happens in this case, both might be pertinent because COVID did affect travel a lot, and Delta is in the airline industry. So just parsing this and understanding that the task that the user is trying to accomplish will help us answer this better. And of course, then you have to do relevance ranking of the results and of the different query parsers as well. So to give you an example, this example brings to light that it's important to consider the spatial and temporal dimensions of a search. So spatial dimensions, what do I mean? Are they searching narrowly or broadly about an event or an entity or a sector? Temporally, are they just looking to see what's happening today? Do they want to digest what's happened in the last 3 to 6 months? What's really their purpose? So like any query, you want to parse it apart in the spatial and temporal direction. And you also have to figure out the presentation aspect, because if I type in a query for the first time, you may want to present me more comprehensive results as opposed to when I am monitoring that query or posting that query again a few hours later, because then I might have already consumed a lot of information. So the second time, third time, fourth time around, I'm only looking at the novelty of the information that you're going to present me. So presentation is a non-trivial aspect of the whole search and discovery experience, because it's usually not one query, it gets answered and the clients go away. At Bloomberg, we really want to look at the sessions and the context in which people are asking questions, and then give them the best answers based on that. To give you more detail, if the query is like Sony or Toyota in the last 2 weeks in Japanese, we have semantic parsing frameworks along with things like entity linking and topic classification and intent detection that allow us to say, okay, Sony and Toyota are companies in this context. Last 2 weeks is a time range which is reflected in the search period, and in Japanese, in this context probably means that the stories have to be published from the media in that country. So like, that's kind of what you're seeing. I've given you a few more examples. So like the first one is, oil last week, understanding that oil is a topic and last week is a time frame. Complex logical structures. So like, German or French parliament elections, you need to understand that parliament elections applies to both German and to French. French is in the nearest neighborhood, but not German. And finally, you need to figure out whether you want to use an open vocabulary or not. So there was this event not so long ago where a lot of papers were leaked. There were around 12 million leaked documents with around 3 terabytes of data that the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists published. And the leak exposed secret offshore accounts of 35 world leaders, including current and former presidents and prime ministers. So that's not the point of the talk. What I'm trying to say is you need to make a decision as to whether you want to go with Pandora, the company in this case, or you want to actually interpret this as a key phrase, Pandora papers. And that's the complexity in semantic parsing. And a lot of NLP techniques are used in this case. And remember that whenever you have a search system where the users come from diverse backgrounds and you have diverse collections you want to answer from, you want to have semantic parsing that's accurate to each of those subsystems. So for us, just highlighting some subsystems like bonds, charts, economics, equities, holdings, news, people, research, it may or may not be possible for you to build a single parsing framework or single set of parsing models that can accurately detect all of these domains, because there are very idiomatic ways of referring to things in different domains. So to give you an example, yearly net income of Google and IBM in the last 20 years, that's something that we can parse and understand that a chart is a good answer for that, because you can visually present that data. Similarly, one of the beauties of the terminal is you can actually connect to people, right? So who are the UMich alumni that work for Goldman Sachs in New York? Even as I'm reading, I realize that I expand GS without knowing, but that's the kind of parsing framework you might want to have in order to have good results presented to your users. And finally, let's not underplay relevance ranking. Once you've understood the query, once you've enriched your content and built your indices, you do need to query all the subsystems and present a coherent sort of results. Again, the approach is not, it's very intuitive. So you need to balance importance, novelty, and recency. And in this example, you can see that a query on oil, there are 2 sections. The first one is what we call the gray bar. You're returning the most relevant queries that are ordered by relevance as opposed to by time. And then there are time ordered news, right? And time ordered news in many cases are important because people are monitoring live events as they're happening. And again, the secret is really a lot of good data. Bloomberg has thousands and thousands of domain experts, journalists who help us understand the domain and also generate good data sets for our models. So yeah, the relevance ranking is obviously important, but I figured we'd spend less time on it in this talk. Final piece is discovery, right? Searching is when someone knows exactly what they're looking for, how do you present the right results to them? Discovery is really how do you help them discover some new information? How do you help them generate new ideas? If you look at the Bloomberg terminal or even the web at large, there are many, many things that you can discover, and it's a complex world. So the question is what should you discover given the context you're in, and how best to enable it without being too obtrusive. So that's really the essence of discovery for us. I'll talk about a couple of concrete things we've done for discovery. The first one is, semantic auto-completion. So in the first picture, you'll see that, we can help users by auto-completing to things that both help them accomplish their task, but also might help them discover. And you always need to balance out how much you want to help them explore versus exploit, because their time is valuable. You don't want to give them too many options that they will never hit. And given the preponderance of options in the screen space, you only have so many things to show. In the second case, you're helping query refinement, right? Assets of Lloyd could be Lloyd Bank. There are a couple of Lloyd's banks, and then it can also be of the person Lloyd Blankfein. So on the right-hand side, I've listed out some of the challenges, but auto-completion turns out to be a great way to subtly help users balance exploration versus exploitation. But I told you when I was talking about query understanding that different subdomains might have different semantic parsers that you want to generate. Now, it turns out that it's true even of autocompletes. Autocompletions in one domain don't necessarily work out for autocompletions in another domain. So what you really have is in prime real estate, you need to make sure, given the 10 or 20 options that you can display, you want to make sure that you have a good federated ranked autocompletions you're showing, and you want to balance for clicks and task completion because their time is valuable. You want to help them get their task done, but also you want to like balance for serendipity. So the challenges really are like, how do you even build an evaluation framework around this? So again, the big picture here is auto completions are really a federated problem that we need to solve. A federated solution is needed for that. It's not just about ranking autocompletes in one domain, but also about ranking autocompletes across domains. And again, understanding like, what is the user trying to accomplish? What have they been trying to accomplish throughout the day? That's an important piece that helps us, that might help us in answering the questions well. The other piece of discovery is sometimes you want to take a big picture view, and there are many ways of presenting a big picture view. What you're seeing is initially there's a search on delta variant, right? We interpret that search, we present news results. It turns out that there are way too many stories to click on because it was a very important topic that was going on. So one thing you could do instead is say, okay, let me show you the trends instead. So the second screen that you're seeing are about trends. And that tells you the publication count. In this case, I haven't tried anything fancy. It just tells you the publication count on stories that had this key phrase. And then you can plot it against any time series that you want. For example, you could compare this against some indices and how they have evolved against the story count. You could also look at the key themes on any given day, which is a summarization problem. And you can plot like, any equity that you're interested in, you can plot and see how things are going across this section. And finally, summaries also help aid discovery, right? In this case, someone searched for a 3-month overview of what's happened with Tesla. Perhaps this is the case where the research analyst is looking to add some company to their coverage. And this gives you like different themes that have happened in the last 3 months. For every theme, it also gives you a ranked list of exemplar stories that you can peruse. And this kind of like, this with analytics and discovery really help our users with the discovery process itself. On the right hand side, I've listed out the NLP tasks that are relevant to carrying out to actually execute on such a solution. Finally, to give you a quick summary. So one way to look at it, bottom search and discovery problem, one way to look at it, like, bottom to top is there are users who know what they want and you want to help them find it. That's the search problem. There are users who have already searched for something, but the event is still unfolding. So you may want to help them monitor. And the last piece is discovery, where users are looking for new ideas. And the pillars on which these functionalities can be built on are really, good content, obviously, but very strong enrichment, understanding like, what is this document about? Who are the actors in it, companies, people, etc. How are they related? I think that's a really powerful tool. Ranking and understanding the queries. This is really, really important to understand the specific task the user is trying to accomplish and present results that are meaningful to them. And at times you want to step away and present a big picture through analytics, because that's really how you get ideas generated. And finally, continuous maintenance, right? We are all AI practitioners, and that means that the world is evolving, the data is evolving, our models need to evolve as well. And that is often an understated part of machine learning. But day one, when you productionize a model, that's when the job really begins, because the upkeep of it is important. I'll skip over this slide, which is just a different presentation on the previous slide, and maybe end and take questions with this slide. This just is a representation of the model development and maintenance lifecycle that we follow at Bloomberg, and really hope that everyone is following it. If not, I hope it serves as an inspiration. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay.
I'll also curate a list of publications in the last 1.5-ish years that we've published that are relevant to all of the content that I just presented. So hopefully we'll distribute the slides not too in the near future, and then all of you can look at those presentations. And I think a couple of them are at AAAI 2022. So I hope you guys were able to see those presentations. Okay, I'm done. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Okay, so I think we have time for one or two quick questions. Any question from the audience, please speak up or raise your hand.
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm working on the entertainment side of this whole thing, and I really like everything that you have said. Can you talk a little bit about how you built the hierarchy of topics? Because you really said how you have to be very careful about it, and how the desire of your user is driving this hierarchy and what you discover, because I think that that's very difficult to do.
So the hierarchy of topics, I'm sorry, I might disappoint you with this answer. I think as a company, Bloomberg has invested a lot in domain experts. I don't know if you know this, but we have 2,700 journalists. We have around a similar amount, if not more, of global data, which is an organization which specializes in different domains of data. So like equities data, alternative data, fixed income data, etc. And they, along with our product managers, who in some cases may be our clients from back in the day, they help us define this knowledge graph. And so there is no shortcut to it. The answer is we've done it because we have practitioners in those disciplines tell us what those hierarchies need to be. That's number one. And the second is I stand here delivering this lecture in 2022, and the company's existed for 40 plus years now. So on day one, I think we started small and started building up over time. So anyway, the short answer to you is domain experts are absolutely necessary in order for us to have a good knowledge base, good knowledge graph.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that completely. Like I said, I'm from the entertainment side, so I'm really focusing on the psychology and understanding of what they really want. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, and first, Andrew, thank you so much for the very interesting talk. That's a lot of information. And I will ask a question is more related to engineering, probably engineering side. As you see, you in Bloomberg, it looks like you guys building very complex machine learning model and a lot of models. And now my question is, can you share some maybe learnings? How, what kind of method or tool your team uses to streamline develop so many models together or deploy so many models together?
No, that's a great question, and maybe I can post some in the slides when we distribute them. We'll add something about our data science platform, which will help you understand how we can do this at scale. But the short answer to you is, I think you bring up an extremely important point, which is, machine learning practitioners, in order for us to be very productive, we need a platform that allows us to quickly go from an idea to an annotation task to well understood annotations that have good Krippendorf alpha or something, if that's what you're measuring, to running a lot of experiments, hyper tuning, and then saying, hey, this job looks good. Can I just click and productionize it using technology such as Kubernetes into a horizontally scalable service? And guess what? There'll be automated systems that monitor the output of my service. And if there's a data drift or what is known as covariate drift happens, I'm going to get an alarm. Maybe I continuously sample output and then keep annotating data over and over again. So the first part of my answer to you is Bloomberg has invested heavily in building a platform that allows our ML researchers to be efficient. Now, the second part is on, I think, decisions that people like you and I can also take, which is, it's one thing to say, I'm going to use neural networks, I'm not going to use neural networks, but the decisions are a little more fine-grained than that. If you have a big organization, you want to say, we are going to invest in a open source technology or an inner source technology that we believe the community will adopt, is well written, and also will evolve as machine learning landscape changes. Because if you are managing, if you're working in a team of a lot of people, and somebody is using PyTorch, somebody is using Keras, somebody else is using TensorFlow, someone else is using XGBoost, forget the fact that for the right problem, they might have narrowed in on the right tool. But from a cost perspective, you also need to think, what is the cost of having such a diversity in the code bases that you need to write and maintain? How agile is your organization, and what's the right decision you need to take for your organization? That's also like a non-trivial aspect. So things like programming languages, libraries that you choose to use, they're just as important decisions that you can make in order to have low cost and high efficiency in your organization.
Thank you so much. This is very insightful. Thank you again.